Ken Starr, the independent counsel who brought impeachment charges against President Bill Clinton or recommended them, now sharing never-before-told details about the 1990s scandal that rocked America in his brand new memoir, Contempt, a memoir of the Clinton investigation. Trace Gallagher joins us now, tracking the details from our West Coast newsroom on some news that has bubbled up out of this story today. Hi, Trace.
Hi, Martha. The book drops tomorrow, but a lot of jaws dropped today when we learned that former independent counsel Ken Starr considered bringing perjury charges against First Lady Hillary Clinton. Starr says in January of 1995, he deposed both President Clinton and Mrs. Clinton about the suicide of White House advisor Vince Foster and other issues dealing with the Whitewater land deal investigation. Remember, Whitewater led to the Monica Lewinsky investigation. Starr says during the depositions, President Clinton bobbed and weaved, but was pleasant as he avoided answering questions. But he says the First Lady was different. Quoting now, in the space of 3 hours, she claimed by our count over 100 times that she did not recall or did not remember. This suggested outright mendacity. To be sure, human memory is notoriously fallible, but her strained performance struck us as preposterous, though Starr also acknowledges it would have been difficult to prove that she lied. He also says he regrets taking on the Lewinsky phase of the investigation, but writes that there was no practical alternative. And Starr says there are eerie parallels to his investigation and the Robert Mueller investigation, saying both came at times when the American economy was thriving. And then he was asked about President Trump's comment that Democrats wouldn't impeach him because he's doing such a good job. Watch.
If we don't have the rule of law
Let me ask
in the
you
country,
about
then we have
something
not done
that
what the
you
founding generation said. We're here to establish justice. That's in the preamble of the Constitution. And justice means the rule of law and that everyone is accountable.
But Starr went on to say one of the messages in his book is that impeachment is hell, and putting the nation through that process is wrenching. Ken Starr also mentioned Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, who worked with him on the Clinton investigation, calling Kavanaugh the wordsmith of the now famous Starr Report. Martha.
We are going to talk to Ken Starr on the story this week, and we're looking forward to that. Trace, thank you very much.
Well, since history has finally been outlawed by the American left, we're here to remind you that Robert Mueller is not the first special counsel to dominate American political life. It was 20 years ago this fall, right now, that impeachment proceedings began against then-President Bill Clinton. They were based on the findings of Kenneth Starr's special investigation into Bill Clinton. For 20 years, Starr has avoided revealing his full thoughts about what happened, but now he is. He has a new book out. It is called Contempt, a memoir of the Clinton investigation. Ken Starr joins us tonight. We're really glad to have you. Thank you very much for coming on.
Hey, thank you, Tucker. It's good to be with you.
So you, of course, ran a special counsel investigation. You're watching one now in progress. Have your views on the existence of a special counsel changed? And are you impressed by what Mr. Mueller appears to be doing?
Well, my views have not changed that there is a need for this mechanism. My views have not changed that there was, and I recount this in the book in some detail. The independent counsel statute, Tucker, I think was the wrong way to go. But we do want honesty in government. That, in theory, is what this is all about. I do applaud Bob Mueller for bringing the indictments against the Russian individuals and organizations. Those are very powerful indictments, and I think they're getting to the heart of what happened now almost 2 years ago. But I will also say this. Those indictments do not read about collusion. They read about unilateral action by Russian operatives to try to affect our election. I have serious doubt that there was an effect. We're a big country. We are a country that's a very vibrant, robust democracy. And so in reading some of the ads, I thought they were sort of pathetic and stupid.
They were pathetic and stupid. So you write that one of the reasons we have a special counsel statute is to reassure the public that our institutions are on the level. So, I mean, that's part of the function, is to make people make them believe that justice is impartial and, in fact, deliver impartial justice. With that in mind, are you comfortable with the fact that Mueller seems to have hired exclusively partisan Democrats to the extent we know their affiliation?
No, I'm not, Tucker. I have great confidence in Bob Mueller as a person. So I'm in the school that Bob Mueller is a good and decent man, semper fi. But I must say, and in the book, I try to make the point, and I do make the point, that when there are these kinds of charges or concerns about partisanship, the special counsel needs to respond to those. And so I tell the story of why it is that we built in guardrails to make sure that there could be no fair and objective attack that the investigation was partisan. Of course, the attacks came, but the attacks were very ill-founded. And I think that was part of what Bob Mueller was obligated to do. So I do have concerns about the people around him.
Yeah, well, I think those are well placed. Two quick things about your book. First, you said that you came close to charging Hillary with perjury. She said, I don't know, or I can't recall, dozens and dozens of times in your interview. Clearly, she was lying. Why didn't you charge her?
You have to be able to prove the case. As I make clear in the book, there are clear differences, Tucker, between what a prosecutor knows and what the prosecutor can prove. So we were following Justice Department policy. We knew we had to prove the case, each element of the case, beyond a reasonable doubt. And we came to the view, after looking at a very elaborate draft indictment, a supported prosecution memo, that, as I describe in the book, we decided we just did not have the evidence to bring those charges.
And quickly, this just jumped out at me. You said you were haunted by the Vince Foster case, his death in Washington during the early part of the Clintons' first term. Why?
Because, as I describe in the book, we were trying to get to the bottom of, among other things, how Hillary Clinton's billing records at the Rose Law Firm mysteriously disappeared, which was theft from the Rose Law Firm, and then mysteriously reappeared in the book room where Hillary was writing a book. Now, how did that happen? How did records in those pre-electronic records day win their way, not just out of the Rose Law Firm offices in Little Rock, Arkansas, but to the private residence of the President and the First Lady? And I was haunted by, what did Vince Foster do as the deputy counsel to the President? He took his own life. We knew that he was depressed. We had very significant evidence that he was clinically depressed. Why was he clinically depressed? Complex question, but that's why I was haunted. Why did this very successful, very bright lawyer take his own life within 6 months of the administration taking power? And that haunts me to this day.
Yeah, well, you're not the only one, for sure. Ken Stark, great to see you after all these many years. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Tucker.
Well, the FBI is denying any evidence that China hacked Hillary Clinton's private email server, but Congressman Louis Gohmert says it was the Obama-appointed Intel Community Inspector General who actually discovered the breach, not the FBI. The congressman says the FBI was very deceptive in its omission. Joining me now is Chris Farrell, Director of Investigations and Research for Judicial Watch. So according to Louis Gohmert, this is a very clever response by the FBI. They said, we didn't find any evidence of Chinese hacking into Hillary's server, which is true, according to Louis Gohmert, because it was the IG, the Inspector General, who found out about it.
Yeah, it's always easy to not find something when you don't look for it. It's very simple.
But let's focus on what the charge is. This is Richard Pollack writing in the Daily Caller, is the one who outlined the story. Apparently, from the very beginning of her term as Secretary of State, the Chinese had embedded some kind of bug into her private server that allowed them to look at what was on there. And as we now know, there was a lot of top secret stuff on there.
Absolutely. They were getting CC copies, or carbon copies of virtually everything that went across that server. And they conducted this in a clandestine way for literally years. And so one of the problems in this whole saga, besides all the fighting the Judicial Watch has done to get all these records and make them public, is the fact that with respect to the server itself, we had said, look, there's a statutory obligation on the part of the FBI and the Justice Department and the intelligence community to conduct a damage assessment. They're required by law to identify, hey, what did we lose and how much of an impact is there on the security of the country? You know what the response to the federal government was? They don't want to do it.
Right.
They fought us in court fanatically, saying that they didn't think that the damage was grave enough, even though there's a statutory requirement for them to go and do it.
But excuse me, Chris, for interrupting you.
Sure.
It was actually worse than that. President Obama himself went on 60 Minutes, and I'm quoting him saying, America's national security was not endangered. He told that to the American people. It wasn't under oath. It was on 60 Minutes, but that's what he said.
Yeah, he
there
was still
nothing.
lying. Right.
There was no endangerment of national security at all.
Yeah, he was still lying. And look, let's be clear. When you have an unsecured server, like as Hillary Clinton did, every single first-class intelligence service in the world is going to go after that server, even people that we would consider to be friendly, because they're dying for exactly that sort of information. It's relatively easy to get, and of course, she was so criminally gross in her conduct, and so carelessly and recklessly endangered the country with her security violations, sending all that classified information. 22 top secret SCI emails alone, in addition to hundreds of other secret and confidential emails. Her criminal conduct endangered the United States.
Well, is it too late, Chris, to appoint a special counsel, go back into this to open it all up again?
It is not too late at all. In fact, I think it's a compelling, urgent requirement to do exactly that. Because not just from the sake of the loss of classified information and the vulnerability, the damage assessment that has yet to be done, but also the message that it sends. We have 4 million people running around this country with security clearances. Do you think there's any disparity of treatment?
Absolutely, of course.
And of course, who is most prejudiced by this reckless criminal conduct of Hillary Clinton? The American people are, and they're owed an answer. They're owed justice on this.
Yeah. I want to switch gears back to Mueller. We've been dealing a lot with Mueller, but it deserves dealing with when you think of what's happened and the testimony of Bruce Ohr. Sidney was just on with some extraordinarily good points, primarily that prosecutors very often will use bad witnesses to prove a case that is not provable by corroborative evidence. Do you think that there's enough information now about how poor most of the witnesses for Mueller are so that he won't be able to make his case, or could he still try to do it?
No, I think the points made by Sidney were excellent. There are incredible witnesses in the sense that they're not credible.
Right.
But there's also another problem. Look at those FISA warrants. We just released today important information about, there were no hearings, zero, around all those FISA warrants related to Carter Page, not one. And so since there's no hearings, there's no back and forth, no Q&A with the judge, realize there's no defense there, right? This is just the government talking to a judge saying, hey, we need this. But now you have judges who know they were lied to. A fraud was perpetrated on the court. So what do you think those judges are going to do? I mean, it's a rhetorical question, but it's an important one, because you have federal judges who now know that they were lied to by the government to obtain these warrants unlawfully, to violate the constitutional rights of Carter Page, or perhaps others we don't even know of
well,
yet.
What
are the consequences?
As the great Greg Jarrett said, it should be something that the head of the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice of the United States, says and does, because he has responsibility for those courts. So it's up to him to step up to the plate. Perhaps he will. Let's hope. Chris Farrell, good to see you. Thank you very much for being here.
David.